Good morning. I'm pumped because we're going to talk about our very first lab. This is take 2, so that tells you how excited I am, if I can still be excited even after taking a second take. Anyways, hopefully you have a lab notebook that looks something like this, because this is what you'll do all of your labs in. We don't want any other notes or anything in here, just labs only. Okay. Hopefully this is not ridiculously small. For some reason my iPad's acting strange, but we'll make it work. Okay, so the first thing you're gonna do is take your lab notebook, toss your name on the front somewhere I can see it so it's nice and easy for me to grade, and then you're gonna number the pages. So, you know yourself best. You will be using pen, and so some of you don't write very aggressively, so you can do front and back. Some of you write very aggressively, so maybe you just wanna do front side. I don't really care how you number it, if it's 1, 2, right? 2 here, then 3, or if it's page 1, then page 2, right? That's up to you. So you'll number the pages, put your numbers at the bottom like I have on this guy. Ooh, lightsaber, nice. Okay. And then your very first page is gonna be a table of contents. So you'll need 3 columns: page, date, and lab title. So you can start page, really, I could say, I suppose, 2 through, because this is page 1, 2 through whatever, the date of the lab, and then the title of the lab. You'll leave this available because you don't know how many pages it's going to take, but when you're done, say it takes you 5 pages, pages 1 through 5 or 2 through 5, whatever. Okay, hopefully this direction's better. Let's see. You might not even notice the difference. Anyways, so we have some rules for your lab notebook. First rule, you always write in pen. Pre-lab, calculations, data. The reason we're doing all of your labs in one notebook is if you pass the AP exam and you want college credit, some universities will give you classroom credit, but then they actually need to look through your lab notebook and prove that you did the labs that we said we did to give you the credit for the lab portion. So in a college lab, you have to write in pen, because if you write in pencil, you could erase things, you could kind of fudge your data, right? And so we need to be totally honest. Mistakes happen. I know this will be hard for you. Some of you are perfectionists. If you make a mistake in your pen, you cross it off with one line. That way your teacher can see what your mistake was, and that you're not actually, if you scribble it out ridiculously, then I can't see, oh no, maybe they messed with their data, things like that. And then obviously we talked about numbering your pages. So again, always use pen, and if you make a mistake, you cross it off with one line. Let's say you do calculations wrong and the whole page is a mistake, you just put an X through that whole page. For our labs in AP Chem, I try to give you directions, obviously, but we kind of put our lab in sections. So there might be a purpose, and then materials, and then a procedure. Any sections or headings that I want in your lab notebook, I bold and underline. So right now we're gonna do the lab technique lab. You should have gotten a paper copy of this during orientation week. It's in your packet. It might be a different color, that's fine. But as you can see, the purpose is bolded and underlined, so you should have a purpose heading in your lab notebook. Background, on the other hand, is not bolded and underlined, so that's just something you have to read. You don't have to put anything for it in your lab notebook. Okay, since this is our very first real lab, I have put some hints for you in italics next to each section. So first thing, and I know you can read, but I feel like this is our first lab, so I'm gonna read it to you. Okay, note, since this is your first handwritten formal laboratory report, there are some helpful tips you should use this time as well as in the future. So again, in future labs, there won't be these hints. I'm giving them to you now. You are required to complete the first portions of any lab report in your lab notebook prior to the lab day, including title, purpose, procedure, and data tables. Obviously, your data table is just going to be set up. There won't actually be numbers in it. Completion of these sections can save valuable time and ensure that all data required is properly collected on the day of the lab. Basically, we need you to begin with the end in mind. So you'll have your pre-lab ready, you'll know what your procedure is, you know what data you're going to collect before you actually show up to class. So purpose, here's your hint. Rewrite the purpose of the lab in your notebook. Sometimes I give you the purpose, like in this lab. Other times you have to create the purpose. So in this particular case, because it's given, you'll literally put the title of the lab on top of whatever page you're starting on, page 2, and then you'll have a section heading just like this that says purpose, and you're just going to copy this. The following exercises were chosen to acquaint you with the proper cleaning techniques, volumetric glassware, the balances, and techniques for a quantitative transfer. Okay, now we're at the background information once you've written down the purpose. Notice it is not bolded and underlined, so this does not need to go in your lab notebook, but there are directions. Read and highlight the background section for important information that will help you with the lab questions and calculations. So you are going to read through the information here on your own, highlight anything important. The next section is safety. Notice that is not bolded and underlined, so just something you need to read. We will wear goggles for this lab. All right, the next page is procedure. That is bolded and underlined. Let's read the directions. Read through the procedure parts A and B. Diagram the steps of the procedure in your lab notebook. Your pictures must be identifiable, presented in the appropriate order, and clear enough to follow each step. So when we are in lab, the goal is that you can leave this paper at your desk and only take your lab notebook. So your pictures need to be detailed enough that you can follow without rereading the lab. A lot of the labs in AP Chem, you will be developing your own procedure. This one I call a cookie cutter lab, meaning it's like a recipe, you follow the directions. So it has everything you need in here. When I say diagram, I mean draw. So let me show you kind of some specifics. So sometimes in a lab, steps are numbered, other times they are not, and other times you have to write the procedure yourself. If they're numbered for you, don't worry about keeping the numbers exactly the same, because sometimes one step in a lab report is actually multiple steps of what you're doing. So in my lab notebook, I'm going to say procedure, make that kind of bold and heading, and we're going to start with part A. Practicing volumetric transfer. So the first bullet point says you will be using either a 50, 150, or 250 milliliter beaker. To decide, check that the beaker you are about to use does not exceed 250 grams by weighing it on the electronic balance. Place a few milliliters of crystal violet solution in the beaker, then clean and dry the beaker without using paper towels on the inside. Okay, that seems like a lot. So, well, first of all, let's start with the first step. Your pictures do not need to be fantastic. You do have a little document that was in your packet from orientation week that has lab equipment. So if you forget what something is or you've never used it before, check out that page. It can maybe help you with the drawings. But I'm more of a Steve from Blue's Clues kind of guy. Simple shapes. So it says we're either going to have a 50 mil or 150 mil or a 250 mil. So you can use numbers and letters, but we want to keep it simple. You're not just rewriting the procedure. Okay, the point is that we're drawing it because we can visualize what we're doing. Then we're going to put those guys on a balance, which measures in grams. And it says that it cannot exceed 250 grams. So that would be too much, so the mass cannot be bigger than 250 grams. And so we got to test each of those one at a time on the balance. Okay, so you're literally, that's still the first bullet. Now it says place a few milliliters of crystal violet, right? So I'm going to draw step 2. So this does take a lot of time, but we find that kids are more prepared for labs. If you just read the procedure, you're not actually visualizing what you're going to be doing. But by drawing it, you have to picture the equipment, things like that. So here's kind of what I did last year. So then the next step, again, I called it step 2, the beaker that's not bigger than 250, we're gonna add approximately 3 mils of crystal violet. So I picture the crystal violet, I'm using a pipette to drip it into the beaker. So your job is to draw every step, and it's not necessarily every bullet point, every step. There might be more steps than bullet points for part A and B before coming to class. All right. Next section that's bolded and underlined is data. So after reading through the procedure, determine what data needs to be collected and create a table for that data in your lab notebook. Be sure to include locations for your instructor's initials as described in procedure. So that is fine if it says that you need me to initial off. You can either put that in your procedure, kind of next to that step, or it can be next to your data table. I do not care. But this is something that will be set up before you come to class. And then the last section is questions and calculations. It says questions and calculations for a handwritten report should always be done in your lab notebook. The following questions may be done before or after you have completed the lab. Answer the questions completely. So this is something you can do after the lab. Typically, the calculations will have for a lab will relate to the data you collect. This lab's a little different because we are just practicing some lab skills. So depending on how much time you have before heading to class, if you want to start these, great. If you want to wait till after class, that is fine too. Last year I had some questions on the data table, and this is nothing fancy, guys. So your data table section, you can label it just like you did your other headings. And I know, for example, it says early on that we need to get the mass of an empty beaker, so I'm just picturing a T-chart here. Mass, empty beaker. And then you'll put that value in grams. I know at some point you need to get the mass of sodium chloride, NaCl, which is just table salt. That's going to be in grams, right? And so anytime it tells you essentially to measure something, for this lab, you can just put it in the T-chart. The important thing is your units, because if I ask you to measure volume next, that will have a different unit than mass. So make sure you are specific. Volume of what, right? And then the unit. So don't just say mass, right? That would be confusing. I have mass of empty beaker and mass of NaCl, right? So specific, what are you measuring? The mass, and of what should go in your data table. And then for the initials, just next to your procedure, I just kind of left a room for myself, something like this. Teacher initials. If there's a section that says have your teacher check an initial. All right, that should be it. So next time I see you in person, we are gonna do this lab. It will take the entire 50 minutes, so come ready to go. Essentially, I'm gonna see, hey, are there any last minute questions that I didn't answer in this video? I'm gonna show you where the chemicals are that you need for the lab and how to get them safely with social distancing. And then I'm gonna check your pre-labs to make sure you are done. If you don't have your pre-lab done, then you're gonna miss the lab and not be able to get a grade. So make sure you are prepared, purpose, procedure drawings, and data table all ready to go for class. We will keep this up on the board during class, but this is what your lab station should look like when you're done. It might also help you see what equipment you will need in your drawing, but you also have that lab handout as well. And then just real quick, some reminders so I don't waste class time. I want you to have every minute possible to do this lab. Your summer assignment quiz will be Friday, and all of your summer assignment is also due on Friday, so your 2 packets, objective 1 through 7 problem sets. And this lab, the laboratory technique lab, will be due classroom day 1 of the following week, so Monday 8:31 or Tuesday 9:2, depending if you're cohort A or B, and it will be a formative grade. Okay? Email me if you have any questions as you're working on your procedure drawings.